Welcome back, everyone, to ESG Decoded. I'm Amanda Hsieh, and today I have with me Dr. Nguyen, Tom Griggs. Tom, it's so nice to see you again.
You too, Amanda. How have you been? Thank you for having me. I appreciate this opportunity to connect with your amazing people.
Absolutely. Tom and I met at the Institute for Leadership and Capital Projects, their sustainability conference in San Marcos earlier this year, sometime during the summer. And it just goes to show, like, you never know who you're going to meet at a conference. And you just start talking to people, and next thing you know, here we are.
Here we are, my friend. Here we are. And the weather hasn't changed much, unfortunately.
Right, exactly. What is this year? Well, Tom is, like myself, a native Estonian, but more importantly, he holds a PhD degree in educational leadership. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. A lot about leadership and how it connects to retaining our high performers and engaging our workforce. But before we jump into all of that, Tom, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company, please?
Sure thing. Again, thank you, Amanda, for having me. I really appreciate being here. So, the very short version is I was a college professor for quite a few years. Once I earned my doctorate at University of Houston with a focus in educational leadership, cultural studies, with a dissertation that focused on success and retention of college students. But a lot of those same principles can be applied to the workforce as well. I was back in the classroom teaching, and I really enjoyed teaching, but as an adjunct with a doctorate in education, teaching at the School of Business, for example, I was only going to be limited to what I can do. But I loved it, and I was passionate about it. And then I said, you know what? I've been doing a lot of speaking, some for pay, some for not, outside of the college environment. So why don't I go ahead and just launch my business? So in December 2014, I left higher education and decided to pursue simply becoming, an entrepreneur, a speaker, a trainer, and like really a human development type person. And my background also focuses in martial arts. I've got over 25 years in martial arts, especially in the world of Japanese Jujitsu, where this summer I just earned my 4th degree black belt at T&T Jiu-Jitsu here in Houston, Texas, with my friend and an amazing instructor, Sensei Overstreet, and the T&T Jiu-Jitsu crew, wonderful people. And I bring that up too because a lot of what I work with or how I dispense the information does sometimes surround itself around martial arts principles. And I love teaching along the different domains when I connect with clients. There's the verbal, there's the auditory, there's a kinesthetic, there's a visual, there's histrionic, all these different things. So I know that teaching is something I enjoy because I always love learning. And so if I'm able to present information to people in a variety of different formats, it stays with you, it sticks with you better, and you don't feel like you're just being talked at the whole time. So between storytelling, crazy visuals and exercises, laughter, compelling stories, and just really connecting with people, that's what I'm trying to do, make a difference both in the world of education and the world of business. And fast forward to now, like a lot of us, skip the whole pandemic, had to make me go virtual. So the pandemic had to make me go virtual like everyone else. But that's also been a challenge as well, but I love it. So I just appreciate the opportunity to be here and work in those areas to help people. So that's where I'm at so far. And let me know how you like to receive, my friend.
Yeah, so I want to learn more about black belt leadership.
Okay.
I know it's one of your signature phrases, and obviously I'm so curious to learn about how this martial arts connection, ties into really leadership advice, how we can be better leaders. What can we learn
Sure.
from that?
So I always, and thank you for that. One thing I always talk to people about is what comes to mind when you think of the term or the phrase black belt. A lot of people visualize maybe someone who's in great shape and they're very disciplined and they're very focused and they practice their punches and their kicks or whatever every day. And that's part of discipline in the regiment to stay or maintain your level. But the other part of that is what we teach at T&T Jiu-Jitsu is what we call our tenets of jiu-jitsu and things like compassion, honor, and respect. So I think when you take those traditional values of martial arts and apply them to all parts of your life, not just in the dojo or the dojang or whatever art you practice, your gym, your school, when you take it outside of that into places like your home and the workplace, it can help you. So I don't teach people, here's a punch kick. Now, when you go to work tomorrow, if someone makes you mad, just, punch a person at the water cooler. But we're not doing that, okay? We have way too much of that going on right now. But I think teaching people, right, how to take something and redirect that energy, because it's Japanese Jujitsu, it's the art of, the science of softness and the science of and the art of yielding. You can kind of take something that comes at you and redirect it or sidestep it. Just because someone pushes you doesn't mean you have to push them back all the time. Now, teaching things like conflict negotiation and working with difficult people is another area, obviously, I find myself getting pulled into, which I've enjoyed the challenge and it's very helpful. You also realize how to be tactical. And one of the biggest, most tactical approaches you can have is empathy. And working with people, for example, I know we were talking about that earlier, but trying to understand or approach somebody from a place of empathy, even if they're the aggressor, even if they're being a little bit hot-headed, even if they're being unprofessional. Now, again, I'm talking about in the workplace. In the parking lot, hey, you want to go, we can go. I'm kidding, I'm kidding. I had a friend who used to make a joke. He was from the country, and he's like, whenever somebody wants to fight, he goes, I don't want to do that. If you want to get froggy, we can jump. I'm like, what in the world does that mean? If you want to get anyway, but you get the idea. so, I always try and encourage people. How can you hold yourself to a better, higher standard, right? And so, in the more traditional model, what you look as a black belt, you're someone who's very skilled, but someone who also has a level of maturity, psychological comfort with themselves, so that they don't have to go around like puff out their chest and like, bully people around or take every little slight thing as a need to do like a Jean-Claude Van Damme barroom brawl type thing. I was like, no, dude, this was just a church meeting. You didn't have to do all that. We don't want to go there with people. Every little altercation doesn't have to turn into a knockdown, drag out fight. So a lot of it, when you look at the world that we're in now, especially, there's a very big need for psychological safety, places where you feel secure, and honestly, environments where you feel like you belong. And that's both, especially at work, and people, if you want to venture off and talk about some of the theories and conversations about the Great Resignation and labor shortages and adjustments, I think a lot of that comes down to how people have not learned to yield and work with each other, both from the management and the worker side. So I think that's a good starting point.
It sounds easy to have more empathy. It's not always so easy, though. Like, where do you get started to build that muscle, to be more empathetic? Many of us want to be more empathetic. How do we build that muscle?
Yeah, I think the first thing you have to look at is what's the common ground that we all have. We're going to talk about the work environment for everyone, because that's an easier to start with, where you hope things like violence don't break out. Now, we know stuff does happen, but on occasion, more people you want to punch somebody at work, but you shouldn't. So first and foremost, is it really an attack? I know this sounds funny, but if we were doing a martial arts class and said, okay, Amanda, I'm going to grab your wrist and I'm going to show you how to get out of it with a simple release, then what's attack is. I'm teaching you how a grab, right? I'll say you can realize, okay, that's an attack. We're simulating one and we're working a technique. But sometimes the way people communicate with each other, they're short, they're to the point, they're curt, sometimes they're blunt. A touch on the rude side, we understand. We deal with different people, different cultures, different levels of stress. Was that really a personal attack, or is that just how that person was at that moment? They have a lot of stuff going on. There's something that didn't go right with this last client, and it's still a big pain, in the neck, for example. And so we've all had those days. So everything that seems a little painful or hurtful may not always be an intentional attack. We all have slips of the tongue or come off on the wrong foot, if you would, sometimes with others. So we have to keep that in mind. So that's one part I would think we have to look at. Secondly, is this something that's a pattern? Do you and this person constantly have these barbish, difficult kind of exchanges? If so, okay, then maybe that's something that you and that person, and maybe HR, a manager, or someone needs to sit down and talk about. It's one thing if it's here and there, right? We've all been in work environments where we've had pretty good interactions with everyone, and once in a while you may have a butt heads here or there, but that's understandable. But is it a regular thing with one or two people? And that's something you have to check. If it's something where you're having the butt heads with everyone, then obviously you need to examine yourself and say, well, if I'm just mad at everyone and always trying to start fights with everyone, then it's really me and not them. And I think the last thing you have to look at is, what's your end goal? One thing I tell people is, what are we here for? We're here to work. We're here to get these projects done, work with these clients, sell these products or services, etc. So if we can focus on doing that in a way that's non-confrontational, comfortable, and most professional, you can kind of appeal to the general, again, back to point number one, appeal to the overall reason why people are here and why are we doing the work that we're doing. And sometimes, I think kind of going back to looking at environments, you may have an organization in the company culture where the stress is so high and there's little to no leadership in terms of dealing with some interpersonal cultural issues, as in how people treat each other. Now you're looking at the entire environment as being toxic, as opposed to just one or two people. So you have to kind of, I think it's a multifaceted approach. And honestly, Amanda, one of the first things we tell people is create distance in a self-defense situation. Do I need to come, if you seem mad and upset, I'm walking towards you and you're mad, I think I need to maybe step back or stop moving, start, a little less engagement, a little more distance. Because distance from a situation gives us clarity, time to breathe, time to think, and get ourselves set up and ready for our next moves.
What if you're a leader, right? What if you're a
Right.
leader or in this organization? I use that word leader, meaning that, you have influence, maybe you're managing people, but for some reason you have influence or power in
Sure.
this situation or in the organization. How do you see that? What's some advice there? Basically, one, I guess from the beginning, starting with the culture,
Mhm.
how do you
Right.
create that culture to have that space maybe for empathy? I don't know if that's the right way to think about it.
Right. Right. Well, your first question about how do you create that culture, I would say, one, look at this culture that you already have in place. You can go to a company's website, right? And you can go to the About Us, and here's our corporate values, dot, 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 these 5 things. And I'm not knocking that. That's a good place to start. But how was that interpreted and how is that really dispensed or disseminated throughout the organization? And we all know that just because that's what the corporate values say on the website doesn't mean that's always how it actually is necessarily used or done or it happens in the company. I was reading a funny article that says, your corporate values are great for the clients, but do they also apply to your people? And I think that happens too, right? Because companies are there to service clients and customers and what have you. But what about the actual people who work within the organization? So I think let's look at the corporate values that are espoused and how well are those actually applied to the people within, not just your customers. Then if you look at the culture, what aspects of it, because people are difficult, change is hard for everyone, and we know this. What's one little thing we can start to work on? And generally, it's going to come down to a small subset of things, such as how we communicate, right? Whether not just the technical communication, are we using just email? What's the inner office like text messaging app? I think everyone talks about Slack and things like that,
Slack or
right?
Teams or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And those are great, but more than just the technical aspects is, understanding the words we use, being quick and to the point. Of course, people should understand that when you're in a corporate environment, it's not always about a lot of flowery, floral language and niceties. It doesn't mean you have to be a jerk. It's just, hey, Amanda, it's 1:30 and that report's due at 3 o'clock. What's the update? That's not being mean. It's just we're just getting to the point because we're short on time. Those kind of things. So helping people to understand that don't read too much, especially into text communications. We've been talking about that forever. As a college professor, I used to explain that to students all the time. So when you get out in the workforce, sometimes people are very blunt, curt, and to the point. It may come across as rude. They're just doing business. They don't think they're being rude. And so you can't read too much into a text message or even an email unless a person is really, nasty or unpleasant. And if you're not sure, just ask, answer the question first. Hey, that report's due at 3. I should have it done by 2:30. And then if you have a side question about something, maybe the way they delivered it, maybe you can schedule to talk with them afterwards or offline after 3 o'clock when the report's off, right? Things like that. So looking at the culture, what's one thing we can start to work on? First is the values and how they're actually disseminated throughout the actual organization, not just for clients. And then what's one thing that we can change if we need to? And again, starting the ways we communicate. One of my wife's favorite in her, because she, being a interior design professional for many years, is how well do people manage expectations? That's also very problematic. Just because I think of it as this way, and I've communicated to you that this is how I want it done and this is what I want done, is that a reasonable expectation? If you do something different and I get mad at you, I have to ask myself the question, did I clearly, fully communicate that thing that you did differently, I want it done another way? Well, you should have known that's how I wanted it. I don't read your minds. We told families and spouses, we don't read minds. Please communicate. So I think you look at mismanaged expectations is a big part too. So I'll just start with some things like that. Understand your corporate values and are they holistically engaged, and pick one thing at a time and work on it. And as always, get buy-in from everyone. Talk to people. People need to have the conversations. People need to be heard. And that's how you grow, is through listening and conversation and following and understanding. So I would just say, so let's start with those.
I was thinking about the other day, trying just connecting with people and how to better connect with different folks, and, part of it is, trying to find that common ground. But I was also, reading and talking to someone about, it doesn't always have to be finding common ground, but she said building bridges. I thought that's a different perspective. Like, you may
Right.
not always find common ground, but at least you can build bridges. What do you think
Absolutely.
about that?
It's so funny.
Should we always be looking for common ground, or sometimes do we have to be just find a way to bridge our differences?
I like them both. I'm not trying to be flippant. I think common, no pun intended, approach is to find common ground. If, however, you're trying to find common ground and it doesn't seem to be there, then your next logical step would be, okay, where can I build a bridge? So I think that both those approaches absolutely work. We all try and find something that we can, something somewhere, some way, somehow that we can relate to someone else, right? And when you can't seem to do that, where can we build that bridge? How can we, go over there? Because even in the concept of building or finding, those very strong action words, it's me making the effort, but I have to ask myself, is the other person always also going to reciprocate, or are they going to, how are they going to receive my effort to find common ground, my effort to build a bridge, which is better? I think they both work nicely. I think we generally start with trying to find common ground, and from there, if we can't, it's tricky, but let's try and see if we can find ways to build bridges. So I agree, but again, how well are we trying to communicate? What's our relationship with this person? The person who cuts you off in the Starbucks line may get an earful from you, or they may not. You may not try and build common ground or build a bridge with that person. You jerk, you cut me off. My Americano was waiting for me over there. We have that tendency, so we have to look at context as well.
I'm hearing context, but also hearing, a lot of self-reflection as well, looking in the mirror and kind of taking that hard look at ourselves. I remember also you have some thoughts about resilience and how we can be
Mhm.
more resilient.
Right,
Tell me
right.
about that.
So there's so much, and people are doing the whole it's a new buzzword or catchphrase, but actually it's variance and resilience have been around for a long time. Some people look at lean and agile organizations as one. So here's one for you. Instead of resilient, remember everyone talk about nimble, lean and nimble. I mean, being, yeah, yeah. But when you think about it, it's what do we mean by nimble? It's how well an organization can respond to market changes and this, that, and other. Sounds like resilience to me. How well you can bounce back and deal with, you know, negative situations or difficulties, crises, etc. Well, COVID pandemic, it gave us all, put us all in a state of crises. So resiliency to me, whether we look at it at the black belt perspective of being able to, if you fall down, how you get back up, being able to endure very difficult times, fight two, three, four, five opponents, whatever, wherever you look at it. I think it's an important concept that's going to stay with us for a long time. And I think that we have to realize that the next thing that comes along that's going to maybe take the world on that we're not prepared for, it's hard. I mean, how do you prepare for something that you don't know how it's gonna happen? But it's having those things set in place. So I think we look at a lot of companies now that are doing things like how much are they saving up for things like budget shortfalls if you do have to do a lot of work from home, like we had to do, or many of us had to do. How do you prepare for employee disengagement? They're doing the work, but they're not the same people because they're not around other people. So I think that you have to understand that we all have to go through this together. There's that empathy piece again. We've all had to endure and go through things. When you look at labor shortages, those are going to be around until some other significant things change, and it may take a little while for a few years before other people realize, you know what, it's okay getting back to work in this perspective. Maybe the organizations will have changed in terms of how they pay, benefits, and all that. We understand. There's a lot of discussions that are still unfolding. So resiliency to me for organizations, even in higher education and an area I do a lot of work in as well as corporate, is looking at, for example, college admissions. There are some of them are estimating 2 or 3 years where they can possibly get back to what seemed like a steady flow pre-pandemic. But in the meantime, what do? You carry on, you learn, you adjust, you keep going. And you take some time to breathe and have a little fun. I mean, thank your people for being there. Give yourself a pat on the back, but also ask, how can we do a better job? And come with some gratitude and love towards everyone else. I mean, I mean that from leadership all the way to your entry level person. I don't care what your job is. The classic big company with the mailroom, the people in the mailroom. They should give themselves a pat on the back for doing good work. They also should be grateful that they're working, and they should find better ways to connect with everyone else. We should all understand that we're all interconnected. We're all different pieces and working together. And I think the resiliency allows you to see that you cannot bounce back effectively and succeed without all your people, and understand what makes all of your people function, tick, and work. And it's more than just the paycheck sometimes. So I think what we're looking at post-pandemic, Amanda, is a reflection of these conversations have been happening for a long time. The pandemic just, for lack of, sorry about all the cliches, shone a light on it or magnified it, or it's a catalyst. It accelerated some of those conversations and the problems that we saw. Because if things don't change, people, they get burned out and they leave. Well, pandemic made that happen so fast that some people felt like they weren't truly valued. So I'll go elsewhere where I can, or I'll start my side gig becomes a main gig, Look how many resilient entrepreneurs we have now, right? It's funny, but it's a natural outlay of what occurs.
Tom, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and sharing your perspective and this idea of black belt leadership and what we can take from the world of martial arts, but also adapt it into kind of the corporate world. Really love this conversation. Thank you again so much.
You're so welcome, and I appreciate you. Thank you very kindly.